Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today we're deep diving once again into the Epstein files. Now, I've made a lot of videos about this topic, and generally speaking, I tend to space out these videos when something actually happens. Now, obviously, look, there's been crazy stuff going on in the world these days, whole war on the other side of the planet. I don't know whether that was implemented to deflect from these files, holding the government accountable for being, for having some of the key people running the country possibly tied up with a actual human trafficker pretty deeply. But ladies and gentlemen, with all the deflections aside, it's back again, okay? You can't not talk about the situation when even the first lady is yapping about it. Now, about a week ago, you probably saw these statements by Melania Trump about the whole Epstein situation, and I feel like it's great to let her speak in this situation.
Good afternoon. The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence.
So that's a pretty huge thing. The First Lady of the United States, the FLOTUS, comes in, starts talking about Epstein, when, remember, ladies and gentlemen, this story largely started to not die off, I would say, but lose a lot of its relevance ever since the, situation in Iran kind of started. So for her to bring this up was actually kind of a shock to not just me, not just, I assume, you guys watching, but also it actually surprised the people at the White House. It even surprised her own husband, for crying out loud. And now, according to the fellows over here writing about it, the actual individuals of the White House were a little bit shocked. According to Trump, he said in an interview that later that day he didn't even know about it ahead of time. On Friday, he then tells that he knew the First Lady had wanted to speak about Epstein at some point, but confirmed he didn't know what she even planned to say. Which I think is really interesting. Like, listen, this is like husband and wife. Generally, when you're going to talk about something as serious as the Epstein scandal in your own home, you probably want to be on the same fucking page every single step of the road, right? Now, of course, obviously, at the same time, at this point, a few days ago, a lot of people in the Epstein, Reddit board, and just people who are researching in general, found a name called Paulo Zampoli, who is apparently all over the Epstein files. He's the person who got Melania her visa, and he also had the president use ICE to abduct and imprison his estranged wife and have her deported. So these are very, very massive claims. And obviously, I think I want to go down into this and read, obviously, what this connection is, because ultimately, up until when I was researching this name really didn't scream out at me. But then again, a lot of names I'm kind of learning, like Leon Black, a lot of individuals like Lex Wexner, who should actually be investigated, are just basically having a blind eye thrown at them. Now, before we jump particularly into Paulo, I want you to understand that this is a situation of what we call the Streisand effect, right? Now, Melania Trump is somebody that is not, she's not somebody that people haven't been talking about. Obviously, people look at images of Donald and Melania along with, these two fucking complete scumbag assholes and realize how is all of this kind of connected, right? And obviously, there were emails that, Melania Trump had actually written to Ghislaine Maxwell, and let me pull up something really quickly, something that she was actually referring to in her statement. So again, that particular 2002 email was apparently exchanged between Ghislaine and Melania. And of course, here, Melania, according to this, writes, "Dear G, how are you? Nice story about JE in New York Magazine. You look great on the picture. I know you're very busy flying all over the world. How is Palm Beach? I can't wait to go down there. Give me a call when you're back in New York." Now, of course, this is back in 2002, and this is before even the, obviously the Florida legal troubles that Epstein had. But you can see that obviously they're closer over here. They're more friendly and cordial. This is definitely more than just being a friend. Like, for instance, I'm friends with a lot of people on YouTube. Very few people on YouTube I've had this kind of correspondence with, other than like maybe on the top of my hand, like 5 or 6 individuals. So you have to kind of ask yourself how close these kind of people were in this situation. So, of course, ultimately, this kind of re-sparked the entire investigation into Epstein, and a lot of people started to look at what thread connected all these people together, and that's where we're going to get in talking about that Paulo individual. Now, to look closer into Paulo Zampoli, okay, the individual that everyone has been talking about, apparently there's been an entire turf war going on in this guy's Wikipedia page over here, which doesn't really bode well. This is the guy, the US Special Representative for Global Partnerships. So just a quick read up over here. After immigrating to the United States and founding a modeling agency, Zampoli became close friends of Donald Trump, claiming he introduced Trump to his future wife, Melania Trump, in 1998. Now, I think we should look closer than just the vague description of modeling agency over here. So the way that Paulo and Melania were connected in this is Zampoli said that while he was a partner at modeling agency Metropolitan Models, he secured a work visa for Mrs. Trump, who in mid-1990s was named Melania Naus. I know she was not working a paid job before she got the H-1B, referring to the type of work visas that U.S. companies can obtain for fashion models of distinguished merit and ability. H-1B visas typically allow people to work and live in the U.S. for around 3 years. So basically, your employer foots the bill and brings you over from the other side of the world so you can live and work in the US, but you're kind of beholden effectively to them. The moment you lose your employment is the moment your actual legal stay in the US is very much threatened. So to go down further into this, right, obviously this is a clear connection, but let's see how, again, Zampoli was connected to Epstein. And the way that we can do this is we can just go to the Justice Department's own page and just pull up a specific EFTA number. So in EFTA 00105195, you can see in this handwriting, at some point Zampoli is a mentioned individual. So you can see in that exact file over here, put in contract with agent Paulo Zampoli, ID models, organized to come to New York to model, living at model's apartment, didn't have funds to pay own apartment, yada, yada, yada. So this is from an FBI proffer. And again, you can read this entirely yourself through the EFTA number that I've provided. It's a pretty long read. So the actual modeling agencies, or at least one of them brought in, and you can verify this from his early life and business career section, which again also comes with its own verified citation, is that ultimately Zampoli, well after dropping out of college, sold one of these companies to a group controlled by Silvio Berlusconi in order to work in a fashion and modeling. Elite Model Management was founded by an individual, John Casablancas, encouraged Zampoli to move to the United States after attending a 1994 fashion show he organized in Ibiza. Now, Elite Model Management is not something new. You can actually dig this up from an article that actually showed up around 6 years ago. And of course, this is where they kind of talk about elite model management, and unfortunately, this is a place where it seems as if there was a lot going wrong, especially when it came to, again, how these models were treated. So according to The Guardian, 4 former elite models in the late 80s and early 90s, when they were teenagers, so minors by the way, the agency required them to attend private dinners with people like Trump, Casablancas, and sometimes other men. So again, when you read that kind of stuff, you have to think to yourself, what the fuck? You know, like what's going on here? These are teenagers we're talking about, you know? Again, going by if this is actually a full valid thing. Remember, a lot of these are also allegations as well too, so just remember that going forward. So there is something that I do have to blur out in this, and it seems to be, again, just underage, like literally children at this point, like preteen individuals that I guess were modeling in this situation too. So others were present to recall underage models being served things like alcohol at the contest. Trump's representatives say he did not provide alcohol to contestants or encourage any models, whether below the drinking age or not, to drink alcohol, stressing he does not drink alcohol and does not encourage others to do so. Which obviously I imagine that is what a, fucking public-facing, press secretary or press individual is a representative, because obviously the opposite sounds really fucking bad. But yeah, this whole modeling agency is marred with some pretty bad press associated with it. And I think it's worth going down this rabbit hole and talking a little bit deeper about it. Now, obviously, people started to look what he did after the whole modeling agency stuff, too. And after leaving the world of modeling, and this is from unlimitedhangout.org, they researched that in the early 2000s, he would become closely affiliated with people like the Clintons as well as the United Nations. So a pretty huge step up from where he actually came from. Actually, an insane American success story if one wants to look at it in that grim way, where he worked on their climate change initiatives and on the development of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, Zampoli was part of the team that developed SDG 14, Life Underwater, alongside Stuart Beck, a figure closely tied to CIA regime change operations in Palau, as well as none other than Ghislaine Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar project. And Terramar, which is actually pretty fucking defunct now, was supposed to be ocean-focused environmental activism, so I guess that's what these rich guys do after they apparently abuse the fuck out of women, children, men. They decide to give back a little bit in charitable causes. Whether that actually goes to the charity, I don't fucking really know, nor do I care to know, okay? These people are shitty anyways. But let's get back to the entire connection between Zampoli, of course Melania, and obviously, as I'm detailing, Epstein and whatnot. Again, the reason I'm going down this thread is to show you how tightly connected this situation is, and it's not something that that exists, in this very sparse, thread. Now, at some point back in the day, back in 2013, Paulo Zampoli, sorry, I don't know why I keep calling him Zampoli ended up actually being an individual that became, I shit you not, an ambassador of Dominica to the United Nations. And of course, this is an individual that at this time, his wife at the time, Amanda Ungaro, who is this model from Brazil, actually showed up as a diplomat as well in this Grenada mission too. So this is, again, just a huge jump from where this guy had started to all the way to now. He's rubbing shoulders with the elite, he's rubbing shoulders with the political bigwigs, and now he's gotten some pretty serious, things added to his resume. Now, of course, obviously, now he serves as the special envoy in the Trump administration for the global partnership system. So, again, this guy is very much, connected to Epstein, very much connected in that modeling agency world back in the day, and he's only ever elevated from there. But the connection still remains, and this guy is somebody that people have started to look into ever since Melania Trump made that statement. Now, because Melania Trump spoke out, people started to look at this Amanda Ungaro. Now, Amanda Ungaro, this is who she is, next to Ambassador Paulo Zampoli, an ambassador. This is an individual that basically arrived into the United States at around the age of 16 to 17. And she had actually, from my understanding, come bearing on Epstein's plane from Paris. So the modeling agent at the time for her was none other than Jean-Luc Brunel, which obviously we've seen that name plenty of times. And it's not a good name, definitely not good connected to this situation. And of course, over here, he was accused of procuring these young women for Epstein, and of course, he had also died himself too in 2022. Now, of course, obviously, when she married Paulo, they actually ended up having a son. Now, unfortunately, the problem with it is obviously, she had split with Paulo, and of course, the son was basically estranged. He was basically fought after by both these parents. Now, of course, the party of family values, Paulo himself, considered that maybe the smart thing to do was, if my wife isn't exactly legal in the country, remember, this guy knows about all the things to do with H-1B visas and bringing people here on work visas. He apparently, allegedly in this case, asked ICE to actually, he asked ICE to go and detain the mother of his kid, possibly have her completely deported in this case. So you can see, Ungaro had been arrested alongside her cousin and husband at a medical spa in Ventura, Florida, where both faced charges of fraud and practicing medicine without a license. Her husband, who held a green card, was quickly released on bail. Ungaro, whose last temporary visa expired in 2019, had no lawful immigration status. So yeah, technically she was breaking the law by being in the country. Now, obviously, he's pretty connected to the top. He could easily get her here in the country. He could easily help her out. But because I imagine he wanted his kid, she was transferred to ICE custody and ultimately deported to Brazil. Sources familiar with the case told the Times that the deportation likely would have occurred without Zampoli's intervention, as Ungaro had already been flagged for immigration detention. However, ICE policies allow for discretion in cases involving minors, and some detainees in Florida have been released with ankle monitors due to overcrowded detention facilities. Zampoli, 56, currently holds the title of Special Representative. a largely ceremonial role he is credited with introducing Trump to First Lady Melania Trump. And again, the allegation comes from the New York Times, where in their investigations, they had talked to top ICE officials, an individual known as David Venturella, who was contacted by Zampoli telling him that Ungaro was in the country illegally and our immigration detention would help him gain custody of their child. Venturella promptly cited or called ICE's Miami field office and arranged for agents to pick up Ungaro before she could be released on bail. During the call, Venturella noted that the case was important to someone close to the White House. So again, I don't know who you want to believe. I have a hard time believing the current administration. But, looking at a situation like this, I don't ask the question, did this person, get somebody kicked out of the country, as much as I think, could this person have stopped, his kid from seeing their own mother getting deported from the country? I feel like that's another question that I have, but it makes me question this man, it makes me question the people that he's connected to, and it makes me question the ethical values behind these people. Now, obviously, Paulo is a very interesting threat to go down, and I can definitely tell you he probably doesn't appreciate videos like this being made or these, investigations onto him, because I think for a lot of people, related to the Epstein case, people were fine when these files weren't released and people weren't looking. But now we're at a situation where people are genuinely asking questions. And actually, it's funny to think that the only reason that the story is back up in the limelight once again is because the First Lady of the United States really just wanted to tell people that she wasn't that connected to Epstein. And it just made people look even deeper. Now, of course, ultimately, what people also have started to discuss too is how connected was Epstein outside to other intelligence agencies. And the reality of it is that if you look inside the actual Epstein files, there's been talks about the Central Intelligence Agencies, there's been discussion that he might be connected to Israel's Mossad, and there's even far-reaching connections that he might be connected to the Russian Kremlin. And the reality of it is that I don't doubt that he's connected to some of the hardest figures you could find out there. Remember, this guy was openly talking with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak pretty commonly, like as if they were just fucking homies. So I can imagine that this guy, even if he wasn't like a Mossad agent, he definitely had connections to those governments, and he was able to relay communications, back-channel things. I reasonably expect that to be a thing. Remember, even people like Robert Maxwell, who was Ghislaine's father, was apparently also rumored long-standingly to have ties to things like Israeli intelligence. Maxwell poured money into the Israeli economy and died mysterious in circumstances after he was said to have fallen from his yacht in 1991. And again, this is coming from a country that is really, really good at fucking killing people that they don't fucking like, okay? Like, let's be completely real here. There's definitely a bigger hand at play running the United States, and it lives in the Middle East, and it's called Israel at this point. Like, that's not really a shock to many people. Like, I think a lot of people are just kind of waking up to the fact that, yes, the real people that run the United States probably aren't even from the United. There's definitely a lot of undue influence. Like, I don't want to just say that, one country controls the other, but there's definitely a lot of undue influence that shouldn't exist to begin with. Just for a country's sovereignty, okay? For Americans to feel that they own America, they should be the ones running their country, not people on the other side of the world. Now, of course, the caveats do also apply as well, too. Remember, I've looked through these Epstein files, and while things like Mossad are mentioned, as is the CIA, as is the KGB, as is the FSB, as is any of these organizations, and usually they are just usually gathered when, Epstein is receiving information about the agencies, not directly in contact with them in any case. It's just that his connections to some of the larger political figures makes it questionable, right? Like if he's actually working for, the CIA, the Mossad, or, the KGB, or whether he's an agent for everybody, right? Because at the core of it, remember, Epstein was connected to very powerful people around the world, not just, random individuals, people that have the ability to control and shape aspects on all parts of the globe, okay? That's how connected this guy was. That's why this is such a huge story, because we're talking about somebody that is probably the most connected fixer in a lot of ways than just somebody that was trafficking people himself too. He was a human trafficker, don't get me wrong, but he was also a very well-connected fixer. And that's a huge story. Arguably the only actual investigation that's kind of happening, that's not even from the federal government, by the way, is literally in New Mexico. So everybody obviously knows the Zorro Ranch. Well, it turns out that the ranch has been searched once again. Actually, March 10th, it came out that state investigators in New Mexico searched the 7,600 acre property that belonged to Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, this all happened because of the Epstein Files Transparency Act and more of these questions being raised. Now, what's going to come out of this investigation, I think we'll find out in due time. Remember, it is an investigation. But it's also interesting when you look at how the current administration and the federal government has done this. When asked for comment on why federal investigators hadn't even looked at the ranch, the Justice Department defers to the FBI. And the FBI, they're just out there declining comment. The FBI has lost almost all of its goodwill, to me at least. Like, I used to think these people were out there fighting for the fucking justice. But in reality, the FBI is basically just sitting there protecting what is probably the worst predators that we've ever seen in modern human history. Now, obviously, since last time we looked at people like Pam Bondi, and she's supposed to be questioned, I don't know when that's going to happen, even though it seems like it may be canceled. I want her to actually be held in contempt if she doesn't talk about how poorly she handled this entire case. Now, this whole story would probably die after Melania anyways, but literally a couple nights ago, fucking JD Vance decides he needs to talk about this story too. So let's listen to what, the vice president of the VPOTUS says.
Number one, the guy was clearly a scumbag, okay? Number two, he clearly had extraordinary connections, both with intelligence services, both inside the United States and outside the United States, and also with a lot of very wealthy and powerful people, okay? Number three, I have been a firm advocate and will continue to be a firm advocate of where we have something, and I'm probably more obsessed with this than most officials, okay? Probably more obsessed with this than most people even in this room, is when you see somebody who says something in an email that suggests, there's one email I read, and it's been a little while ago, but it was talking about, one person sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, oh, there were some really nice, pizzas and grape sodas or something like that. And I remember it sounded like the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, but here it was in an email from a guy. And my reaction to that was, we should absolutely investigate that person, okay? And, you remind me, I'm going to follow up on that to see whether we've investigated that person, because we should. We absolutely should. When you see evidence of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, regardless of whether you're powerful or not, in fact, you should probably investigate it more if you're a powerful person.
Bro, you are the powerful person. You're literally the VP, motherfucker. You sit next, you work with the guy that runs the country. What the fuck? So obviously over here, I want to just stress that this is a pretty huge statement. It's the Vice President of the United States who basically is publicly affirming. He's not really even sitting there speculating. He's basically saying that Epstein had intelligence ties, domestic and foreign, okay? So again, I would imagine, aside from, okay, let's forget the human trafficking stuff for a second, okay? Clearly the current administration doesn't fucking care about children getting molested or people being trafficked, at least in my opinion. But imagine just publicly saying that the guy, that, is the talk of the town was connected to foreign intelligence services. Don't you think as the fucking leaders of the country, you would probably start literally clearing house? That would probably be more important to these people, and it should be important nonetheless, alongside the human trafficking, that you had such a connected guy that was also communicating possibly your secrets to other individuals outside your home. You should be investigating it. What the fuck? These people sit down and defend the leadership when the reality of it is that they work for the people. The people should be protected. And ultimately, if anything, the government is putting every effort into protecting the individuals that have been harming the people. It's a fucking upside down world we live in. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? It's interesting, right? This whole Epstein story will not die down, and it shouldn't die down, and people should keep talking about it. The reality of it is these guys actually got so close to getting away with this because ultimately, look, there's a lot more stuff going on in the world, right? The economy is going into the shitter. Gas prices are through the fucking roof. There's a whole war on the other side of the world. We had the UN talking about possible nuclear annihilation. And people were ready to walk away from the story. It wasn't until you had the First Lady of the United States coming up, making a surprise statement that caused an entire group of internet investigators to dig deeper into a whole different person that was connected in a thread to this entire story. Somebody that should be investigated at the same level as Lex Wexner, somebody at the same level as Leon Black, people like Leon Black who should still be brought up and deposed and spoken to, people that definitely know more than they let on. This is a story that won't die down because the government is so poor at cleaning up and sort of like scooping this under the carpet, so to speak, that every time they mention it, people dig a few threads deeper into it. And now we're at a point where we have so many connections, we have so many discussions, beyond just trafficking humans, we're looking at a person that is also connected to intelligence assets around. So what kind of stuff is being discussed? I think the government should be even more transparent than they're trying to allegedly be right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Epstein is a story that just keeps getting wilder. And every time I talk about it, it seems like I have hours and hours of new stuff to discuss. But I have to really condense it down. I have to make it so that these videos are informative. I have to make it so these videos are engaging. And so, you get to a point where you get some new threats to look into, and people really start to see the scale of how big this story actually is. It's not just one guy distributing models around. It's somebody connected to the most powerful people in the world and is able to control the life me and you live with his connections. And his connections, who allegedly have been abusing innocent people, are still just roaming around free. Justice needs to be doled. If not, we can't shut the fuck up about it. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.